Hello friends, I am Harshal Bagaria of Section C PGP 2016-18 batch of IIM Trichy, and today I will be talking about land reforms in India, how they have been came to this extent where they are now, why they are required, what is their importance, what is their history, and what land reforms are actually needed. This video which I am uploading is a part of IEP project as an assignment submission. So let's start. Now, to understand land reforms and what they are today, let us go into history a bit and understand what they were earlier. Earlier, in ancient India, the land reforms were governed by Rigveda, Samhita, which showed that in Indo-Aryans, arable land was held under an individual ownership or family ownership. There was no concept of communal ownership as such. Communal ownership was only confined to the grassland. Land actually belonged to the person who cleared the jungle and brought the land under the cultivation. He had the right to sell, give, bequeath or otherwise alienate it at his individual distinction. So we can see that there was a clear distinction between the ownership right and restricted real estate rights. Then came the Hindu period, which belonged from 1200 BC to approximately 1200-1300 AD. After which came the Muslim period, which belonged from 1300 AD to approximately 1640-1700 AD. In both of these periods, that is Hindu period and Muslim period, land was never considered to be the property of the king or the sultan. It was the property of the village, the king being limited to the share of unfruct for the protection he gave in return. Since land revenue was the main source of state revenue, the village became the agency for collection and unit of revenue assessment. Then came the British period. In British period, the land revenue system was mostly of three types. So first was Zamindar, second was Rotwari system, and third was Mahalwari system. In Zamindar systems, the Zamindar basically functioned as an intermediary between British and colonial government and the farmers. They collected the land revenue from the farmers, basically exploited the cultivators and gave it to Britishers. Then there was Rotwari system. In Rotwari system, there was a direct settlement between the peasant proprietorship and the land by the state, that is British government. So basically, Rotwari had a direct settlement. And then there was Mahalwari system. In Mahalwari system, it was a modified version of Zamindari system with a temporary settlement of land in favor of tenant, village, by village or mahal itself. These three systems not only established obligation of taxation, but more broadly defined the relationship among the layers of the land right and controlled exercise by the state, landowners, landlords, tenants and the laborers. After independence, it was very clear that the Zamindari system or the system which was established by the British government exploited the cultivators. So, the main objectives of the land reforms were abolition of intermediaries, tenancy regulations, that is to improve contractual terms including security of tenure, a ceiling on landholding to redistribute surplus land to landless and attempt to consolidate disparate landholdings. Post-liberalization. See, after independence, land reforms actually were given the major importance. But after liberalization, in wake up of economic reforms, land reform appeared to have taken a backseat in India. In fact, nowadays, sometimes even the philosophy of redistribution of land through land reforms is questioned. In fact, the argument that the land reform stands in the way of market-led growth appears to be misplaced. The experience of countries like Japan and Korea shows that land reforms can help in faster and more sustainable development of capitalistic agriculture without creating much pain for rural population. But market-led economic reforms not accompanied by land reforms could be painful for the rural poor and may not be sustainable in the long run. Since 1991, as the neoliberal development paradigm was put in place, formally, land reform issues have become much more compounded by several realities. Some of the realities are as such. There is enhanced demand of agricultural land for non-agriculture purposes. There have been displacement of people in the hills and forests caused by development projects. There have been decline of about 2 million hectares in the net area sown over the past decades. There have been highly uneven land distribution as reflected in agriculture census 2005-2006 data. Also, wasteland 63.85 million hectare, land which is with or without scrub, waterlogged, marshy, affected by salinity, coastal, shifting cultivation area, degraded pasture land, degraded land under cultivation, sandy, mining, industrial land, all this have contributed to wasteland, which is approximately 63.85 million hectares. To avoid all this or to come up with better reforms, what we need is what I term as second generation land reforms. Now, what are these second generation land reforms? These are land reforms which are actually needed by us, and how these can be achieved. So I am listing down here 7 criteria in which we can achieve the second generation land reforms. The first criteria: aim for universal or at least near universal coverage of potential beneficiaries. That is, try to achieve universalities. Universality can be achieved in 2 ways. First of all, members of the state farm or collective farm, including pensioner, should be given a right to receive land individually. Some Eastern European countries have complicated these steps by giving preference to pre-collectivization landowners and their heirs. This should not be done. The second factor to consider in achieving universality is to include all or nearly all state farms and collective farmland in redistribution. A few countries such as Russia have exempted large portion of this land from redistribution program, hereby defeating its whole purpose. The second is land market development. It is a very important step. Land market needs to be developed. In particular, it is important to build the necessary legal and policy framework and institutional mechanism to enable farmers to transfer land right by lease, sale, inheritance and mortgage, while including, where needed, safeguard to prevent improvident transfer. The creation of such framework and institution can be difficult in settings where land market has not existed for decades. Allow state or collective farm members to exercise various options on a continuing basis, including option to farm collectively, to withdraw their land as a part of small group, or to withdraw their land to create a family farm. This is particularly important in setting where the state farm or collective farm have not broken up quickly or decisively. At a minimum, state or collective farm member or heirs of former small owners under a restitution program should not have to make an irrevocable decision at the beginning of land reform process regarding how he or she will exercise his land rights. The fourth is permit and foster efforts by state or collective farm members to conclude an interim arrangement. These transitional arrangements could include short-term leasing to the state or collective farm while the member decide what to do with the land in the longer term. State or collective farm must be inadequately informed of their alternatives and not forced by the farm management into a particular choice. Fifth, permit collective farm members to withdraw a fair share of collective farm's animal, machine and other non-land assets together with the members' share of land. Sixth, important principles of gender inequality, participatory administration, program monitoring and sensitive treatment of customary law also applies to second generation reform. Women should receive at least equal right to distributed land. Program should be administered by local beneficiaries dominated committees. Program progress and impact should carefully be measured and regularly monitored. And customary law regime should be treated sensitively and not summarily replaced. Seventh, factors that played important roles in overcoming political obstacles such as grassroots support, political will, adequate compensation, public education and information should come into picture. Availability of technical assistance, crucial to the development of training, monitoring, dispute resolution and other measures that help facilitate effective implementation of land reform program. Support from international donors should be in place. Avoid excessive restriction on land sale and lease market, organizing their farm. Collect, monitor and analyze data during all the phases of this program. This way, these second generation reform could actually help us to bridge the gap and improve the land reforms. This is all from my side. I hope you liked my video. Thanks a lot.